I wanted to talk today about being a parent of a young person who is transitioning from one gender to another. My young person is not that young. They're still young. They're 16. But they've known, I think, for a very long time that they didn't feel they were in the right gender. And they've been telling me since they were about 11. So it's been going on for a while. So, gosh, I have a lot of thoughts about this. And um, one reason I haven't made anything earlier, even written about it much earlier, is because I've always felt that people who sit outside of a group shouldn't usually talk about what's going on inside the group. And so there's a lot of ethnocentric judgments going on where we just judge somebody through our own frame of reference. So I've stayed away from it for this reason. But actually, I think that being a parent, particularly at this day and age, and having a child that, even though they're not necessarily a child anymore, but having your child transition is its own experience. So when I say this day and age, what I mean is that this wasn't something so many people were openly dealing with a couple decades ago. And it may be that in a couple decades from now, it's not going to be as big of a quandary, quandary issue. It's not going to be as big of an issue. I don't know. It might be, but it might not be. I can imagine it dying down a lot just because it'll be a new generation of people, a new generation of parents. I think what's going on with our generation right now in 2024 is that this is new. Like in 2010, I think it was, I think that's when TikTok came out. And a lot of people equate this rise in being transitioning with TikTok. And I don't think that's wrong. It's not necessarily wrong because it was sort of a way for young people to see, hey, there's options here. It doesn't mean that young people have been all indoctrinated by TikTok or whoever's on TikTok. It doesn't mean that they've been influenced against their will. It may be that they've just realized, oh, that's a possibility. You grow up in a culture and you don't see certain examples of who you could be, and you don't consider that you could be those people. You see examples, and then you think, oh, I could do that if I want. Okay, so coming back to the parent for myself, these things, these topics that I think come up for parents, which is one is, was my child influenced? Was it something they're doing out of peer pressure? They're seeing other people do it, and that's why they're doing it. Is that what's going on? Or is this really authentically what they want? Um, there's fear. Oh, there's fear. A lot of different kinds of fear. One fear that I've had really strongly is, am I supposed to stop this? So some parents are very traditional parents, and they're like, you are your birth gender, that's it. Other parents might be somewhere in the middle, and then others are very liberal. And I was watching a show the other night where somebody said, we're not going to use pronouns until they're 5 and can tell us what they want. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm not quite over on that side. I'm probably in this area, like not in the middle. I'm left leaning. I'm left leaning. I've always thought I'm very accepting. And then my young person, I'm gonna call them my Dawn. I'll have to explain that in a minute. But my Dawn told me I don't identify as female anymore. And I was okay. So and as far as being told that, they were 11 and there was no physical implications to this. There was no real change going on, just this is how they feel. And I'm listening to them. So I was fine. Okay. They wanted to go by a different name. Okay. That was also okay. Where it started to become a bigger thing was when they wanted to use their new name at school. And then I would have to tell school, yeah, they want to have that new name. I know some people are up in arms about the fact that children can request at school directly, this is what I want, and the parents may not be told. That wasn't the issue. where I live in the northeast of England, at least like 5 years ago, and with the schools what my Dawn goes to, the issue was I had to go and tell the school, can you please use this other name because they're exploring gender options. And then I had to deal with the school potentially looking at me like I'm crazy, or overindulgent. So this is when, and part of me does wonder, am I overindulgent? I was scared. I was scared. But the fear didn't come yet when they were 11 or 12. We start talking about taking taking testosterone. And when we first started talking about it, probably around 13 or 14, it was just an idea, not something they were going to do yet. And then as they get closer to 16, which is the legal age where you can start getting that in the UK, as far as I know, I'm not quite sure if you can get it before then, but that was to seem for them, for my child, that was their marker that they were waiting for. As we get closer to 16, I start worrying. What does this mean? What kind of changes are going to happen? Um, Increased risk of heart attack is a thing. There can be lots of things. And there's lots of scary propaganda out there about what could happen. The thing is I don't know. The question, is this a phase? I don't think so. But also, I mean, is it any more a phase than anything else in our life? As we grow, even I'm 46 and I'm still discovering who I am. I've only just recently started vlogging and I quite like it, but I didn't know that about myself until recently. And I became a psychotherapist at 33, so we're always, and I'm going to be learning new things about myself until I die. I hope. There's no finding your authentic self. I think it's always a continuing journey. And the point is ultimately, I don't know what's right for them. I don't. I can only let them discover what they think is right for them. I could try to be one of those parents who says, no, don't do this. It's dangerous. It's scary. I could encourage waiting. I have opinions about the argument that people can wait. I don't think that if you know who you are, if you know that you feel like you're not your gender, your birth gender, if you know that about yourself, if you're 16 and you feel like you want to be, if you were born a female and you feel like you want to transition to male, you want to have your young life, your young years as late teens, early 20s, that young adulthood. You want to have that in the body you want to have that in. You don't want to have it in the wrong body. Because then what happens is whenever the parents or whoever else is judging you thinks, okay, finally they're old enough to make that decision, then you're a proper adult. I think there is something developmentally important about feeling confident in your body, in your gender, in your sexuality, feeling confident in your late teens and early 20s, because that's a time period where you get to find out about yourself in that way. You have relationships, or whether they're platonic or romantic, you're going to parties, you're being social. It's a specific time. And if you're in a body that you're not comfortable in, I think that something gets lost in that. Anyways, but I also think this is really uncharted territory for parents who are living right now. I can think back over centuries, maybe it's more fair to say over decades, about how things have changed over time. And I can imagine that there's been periods where parents have always felt freaked out, like tattoos. Everybody's getting tattoos nowadays. And oh, belly button rings. I mean, clothes, women wearing short skirts or cutting their hair short, just whatever it was, whatever the cultural norm was as it was changing and people were becoming more free spirited and experimenting more, parents were worried. And there's something I think about what not wanting to fail as a parent, not wanting to fail your children. And my thought process, which has worries and bias, and even bias I didn't know existed. That's just like really small voices in the back of my head. It all kind of comes out. And ultimately, what's at the basis of it is, am I going to fail my child? And the answer is, I don't know. And also, probably, because you're not going to be 100%. You're going to get it wrong. Some part of me is going to get something wrong. Whatever action I take, something's going to be wrong. Then, but I'm trying to make it, I'm trying to do the best that I can with what I think is right. And to me, my parenting philosophy, or my parenting beliefs are that we can't control children. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in using power to get children to behave. I was not somebody who was into corporal punishment, and I've always been pretty transparent with my kids. So if I mess up, I'll say sorry. I don't have this attitude of parents, authority figures can't be human, because I'm not here to change them. I'm here to support them. I'm here to help them on their journey of becoming whoever it is they're meant to become. Maybe this sounds a bit like hippy dippy, but that is how I've felt we are supposed to parent, how I'm supposed to parent. And I've watched my kids become people I really admire. So my children, when they get something wrong, will apologize. I've had my Dawn come home after a bad day at school, which she doesn't have very often. I misgendered them. I think I'm gonna leave that in because it happens occasionally, and I don't want to pretend like I don't ever do that. Sometimes it's hard. Um, yeah, okay. What was I saying? I've had my Don come home after a bad day at school, and he will say, I've messed up. This is what I've done. And I actually really admire, if he has done something he regrets, that he can just say that. He's not sitting in shame. He might feel a bit ashamed about it, but he's not sitting in that and pushing it away. He's just owning it. And he understands that once you've owned it, you can let it go. So he'll come home, he'll tell me, I've done this thing, I really regret it, and lets it go. And I think I'm so proud of him. And I'm going to brag about myself. I think that comes from being a parent who will say when I've messed up, and I don't pretend like I don't. I don't want to raise kids who try to pretend like they don't mess up. I want to raise kids who own that they're human and can say sorry and be empathic. And they are. They're both very empathic. Anyways, I'm very proud of them. I have two children, one who was born male and one who has transitioned to male. I was going to explain the word dawn. So before my younger child transitioned to male, um, he, they, I go across the spectrum of pronouns because they were originally a she, then they became a they, and I got really comfortable with they. And I've actually started neutralizing everybody's pronouns sometimes. And then that gets confusing, but that's another video. So when my Dawn was 11, then they said, I don't feel female, but I don't feel male, and I think I'm just gonna be somewhere in the middle or gender fluid. I was like, okay. So after a while, I realized, what do I call them? I'm talking about my daughter, but I can't talk about my daughter because I don't have a daughter. I can't talk about my son because I don't have a son. And I think if you are a parent and you have a child who is transitioning, you might find, if you want to be, supportive of the fact that your child is no longer identifying as a daughter and they maybe don't identify as a son, or the other way around, you need a word. There needs to be a gender neutral word for my offspring that isn't actually offspring, because that sounds dumb. So my Dawn and I worked on this, and that's why I call them my Dawn. D is for daughter, ON is for son. We thought about like going down the Latin route and looking for like words in other languages to try and be a bit more sophisticated. This isn't very sophisticated. We just took ON and D and smushed it together, and we have Dawn. Anybody who wants to use that is welcome to use that. I'm sorry. So I feel like I've got a neurodivergent brain, so I tend to go like this and this, and I hope that's not too terrible for people watching. where I'm at with my journey as a parent of a young person who is transitioning is I don't know it's the best, but what feels right is supporting them. I've had a conversation about my fears as parent with them. I've said, look, 99% of me is yes, let's do this. I'll pay for the top surgery when you're old enough. Like that's a legal thing. I can't just, yeah, anyways. But I said, I'll do that. I will be there for you. I will help you and support you. And yes, 99%. There is this like 1% that I'm afraid of talking about, but I need to talk about it with you. It's this 1% that's scared that I'm supposed to say no. I'm supposed to just stop you. And what if I get it wrong? And then I said, and I have to explore some of this with you as well. Like there's a mourning process. I've taken this to my own therapy and talked to my Dawn about it because I think actually that if you're a parent of a child who's transitioning, I think that if we have open conversations, it helps a lot for everybody. Like to be able to say, yeah, I've got some fears. Yes, maybe this is some internalized bias. But you need to make a space to let it out because we all have bias and we all have fears and they all come from somewhere. If you don't talk about it, if you can't look at it, you can't really work through it. Nothing gets changed. You're just sitting there trying to not have the feelings that you're having, and that's no good. So I talked about my fear of them having regrets, my fear of them being unwell, maybe even my sadness about who they used to be, about, or maybe how I imagined they would be and that they're not. And what I don't want to lose in the relationship. They said to me, I'm always going to go shopping with you. And I'm always going to cuddle on the sofa and watch movies with you. And I was like, okay, that's fine then. I mean, there was a part of me that thought, my little boy can't do that. My daughter could have, but my little boy couldn't. And it's ridiculous because, of course, they can. And then, yeah, we started talking about would they have a goatee and things like that. And I just wanted to visualize it. I think there is mourning because your vision of what it was supposed to be or who they were going to be changes. And in some ways, that's just parenting. But for some, the transition is way more pronounced. Um, So that's all I've got about that for right now. I think there's a lot of things that can be spoken about with regards to being a parent of somebody who's transitioning. There is one more thing. Well, you know what? I'm going to save it for a new video. I've had questions from my Dawn about can you relate to this feeling? Um, there were two feelings in particular. One was the first question, when they were maybe even a little bit before 11, they said to me, I don't feel like a female. Do you know what that feels like? And I'm going to make a video about that because answering that question, really answering it, took longer than I thought. I thought the answer was no, and spoiler alert, it wasn't no, and that's another video. The other question is, I don't, it's a little bit different than the first one, although it may sound similar. I don't feel right in my body, which isn't, I don't feel like a girl, but it was more about the physicality of girl bits, boobs, boobs. It's about that not feeling natural for them. And then they wanted to know, do you know what that feels like? Do you know what it feels like to not like your breasts? Um, and again, same experience. It took me a while, like a while of turning that question over to find the ways in which, yeah, I can relate, even though I'm um I still identify as my birth gender. I've never gone through that kind of transition or to that level. I still have ways that I have found to relate to them, but I will look those up in future videos because I think this is getting a bit long. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I think this is going to be a new sort of theme that I'll cover once in a while is my journey as a mom who has a child who's transitioning. because I can tell this is going to bring up stuff for me that maybe other people have experienced too. But if you're watching this, I tend to talk about all things neurodivergent, although at the moment I focus a lot on parent carer blame. So I've got a lot of videos that look at that. And if that's something you're interested in, maybe check that out.